Hi everybody, it's Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain Radio. This is a show particularly directed at you, my friends, who are unemployed or underemployed. I think it's so important to not take this personally and to understand that there is only one fundamental reason that you are unemployed, and it doesn't have anything to do with failures on your part. So this is a sort of reach out, sympathy message, and hopefully a sunburst of clarity onto why you were unemployed. I've gone through it myself. When I graduated in the 90s, I had a good degree from a great college, and I couldn't find even work as a waiter. I couldn't find work doing anything. I had to weed people's gardens. I had to paint their garages. I had to wash their cars. I mean, it was ridiculous given the amount of education and knowledge that I had, but that was the reality of where things were. And so many people are out there in the same situation at the moment. And I just really want to express my sympathy and tell you why you're in this situation. Why are you unemployed? Well, you're unemployed for one very basic, simple, and clear reason that is never talked about in our culture. Let me tell you what that reason is. The reason that you are unemployed or underemployed, my friend, is that if you get a job, you're going to be thrown in jail, or your employer is going to be thrown in jail. It's that simple and that powerful. There's a big gun in the room that nobody's talking about called state coercion, police aggression, kidnapping, and imprisonment, which is why people aren't getting jobs, which is why you are not able to get a job. And let me tell you what I mean. Let's say some guy wants to hire you and he can't afford to pay you above minimum wage at the moment. Well, then and you're willing to work for less than that for whatever reason, get a toehold in the industry and so on. My first job was at $1.90 an hour. Okay, it was a while back, but it's okay to get your toehold into the job market and then just start working your way up. Let's say you want to get a job for a wage that's below minimum wage. You can't do it. Why? Because if you agree voluntarily with an employer to work for some amount that the government doesn't like, you will be thrown in jail, or your employer will be fined. And if he doesn't pay the fine, he'll be thrown in jail. And when they come to arrest him, if he resists arrest, he might get shot. There's a gun in the room that's keeping you on the couch or keeping you watching YouTube. Let's say you want to be an entrepreneur, but you can't fill out the paperwork, or you can't fill out the forms, or you don't have enough knowledge of the 6 million different tax codes that you're subjected to as a business owner. Let's say that somebody wants to rent you an office space but doesn't want to pay off the government with its property theft taxes. Well, you can't make that voluntary arrangement to get work. Unionization, minimum wages, excessive regulations, all of these make it impossible, illegal for you to get a job in voluntary, peaceful transactions. That's not something you're hearing about. There's so many layers of overcomplexity that go on. And if you don't see the gun in the room, everything just seems complicated and confusing and weird and exhausting, and forget all of that. It's that simple. You're going to get arrested for getting a job. If you don't agree with the violent rules of your society, you're just simply going to get thrown in jail. The reason that you're unemployed is exactly the same reason that gazelle run away from lions. It's exactly the same reason that zebra cross a river with crocodiles at a high clip. It's the same reason that sheep all run in the same direction when sheepdogs are biting at their heels. It's the same reason that elephants stampede when one of them is getting shot. The reason you don't have a job, the reason you're unemployed or underemployed is very simple. Because you're going to get shot if you get a job. That's what we need to oppose. We need to put down the gun in the room. Stop pointing it at the necks of people who are having voluntary, peaceful interactions in the economic sphere, in the social sphere, in the private sphere, in the artistic sphere, wherever. We need to put down the gun so that you can get a job. This is Why You Are Unemployed, Part 2. Let's start with some basic statistics to put things in perspective. 83% of U.S. stocks are in the hands of 1% of the people. 61% of Americans, quote, always or usually live paycheck to paycheck, up from 49% in 2008 and 43% in 2007. This is an evisceration, a gutting of the middle class. 66% of the income growth between 2001 and 2007 went to 1% of all Americans. 66% of this is why your salary has not increased or has declined since about 1980. 36% of Americans say that they don't contribute anything to retirement savings. A staggering 43% of Americans have less than $10,000 saved for retirement. 24% of Americans say they have postponed their planned retirement age in the past year. Over 1.4 million Americans filed for personal bankruptcy in 2009, a 32% increase from 2008. Of the top 5%, only the top 5% of U.S. households have earned enough additional income to match the rise in housing costs since 1975. For the first time in U.S. history, banks own a greater share of residential housing net worth in the United States than all individual Americans put together. In 1950, the ratio of the average executive's paycheck to the average worker's paycheck was about 30 to 1. Since the year 2000, that ratio has exploded to between 300 and 500 to 1. As of 2007, the bottom 80% of American households held about 7% of the liquid financial assets. The bottom 50% of income earners in the U.S. now collectively own less than 1% of the nation's wealth. Average Wall Street bonuses for 2009 were up 17% when compared with 2008. In the United States, the average federal worker now earns 60% more than the average worker in the private sector. The top 1% of U.S. households own nearly twice as much of America's corporate wealth as they did just 15 years ago. In America today, the average time needed to find a job has risen to a record 35.2 weeks. And of course, what kind of negotiating position are you in when you try to get a job after looking for that long? More than 40% of Americans who are actually employed are now working in service jobs, which are typically very low paying. For the first time in U.S. history, more than 40 million Americans are on food stamps. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture projects that number will go up to 43 million Americans in 2011. In China, a garment worker makes approximately 86 cents an hour, and in Cambodia, a garment worker makes approximately 22 cents an hour, which some people feel is a competition issue. Approximately 21% of all children in the United States are living below the poverty line in 2010, the highest rate in 20 years. Despite the financial crisis, or I would say because of it, the number of millionaires in the U.S. rose a whopping 16% to 7.8 million in 2009. The top 10% of Americans now earn about 50% of the national income. I mean, this is gruesome, my friends. This is tragic. This is hideous. This is monstrous. If this doesn't make you angry, then you have no fuel left in your veins for anything. If this evisceration of an entire generation's possibilities, both past, present, and future, if this gutting of the middle class, if this radicalization and Sovietization of the wealth spread does not enrage you, doesn't piss you right off, then nothing will in this world. So what the hell is going on? The statistics that I quoted you, and I'll put the sources below, are very, very important. From the age of 5 to the age of 18, you are in the government training camps. And what the fuck are you trained in? A little bit of algebra, a little bit of math, read a couple of books. Ooh, don't forget, the government saved you from Nazism and the Great Depression, because the government makes things better for blacks, and the government makes things better for women, and the government is necessary because we need roads and national defense. So you were taught just bullshit, lies, and propaganda. You weren't taught any real skills to actually compete in the world. You weren't taught any entrepreneurial skills. You weren't taught how to run a business or how to be a good employee or how to go for an interview or how to get a job or how to write business reports. You weren't taught how to do accounting. You weren't taught any of these things. You could have been taught virtually all of them by the time you graduated from high school. You want to know what public school is? Public school is a holding pen to keep young, hungry, and ambitious people away from competing with fat old middle-aged plumbers and lawyers and accountants. It's a holding pen to keep you out of the market so that people can raise their rates without being competed for by young people who don't have families and have lower living expenses. No kids, right? I mean, do you not think that within 6 months, any average 14-year-old could be a highly competent plumber and electrician. Of course they could be. But you want to try and set up shop as being a plumber or an electrician or anything like that? No. You get shot unless you join the union and spend years slaving away at low rent wages for bullshit knowledge that you could acquire 100 times faster. So the fact that you've graduated at the age of 18, after 12 or more years being educated by a government with virtually no useful skills in business whatsoever, that's why you can't make any goddamn money. Victimhood is such a quicksand, is such a sticky trap that all who use it are genuine parasites on the vulnerability of people in need. Everybody who is a coward wishes to believe in their victimization. Everybody who is a failure wishes to believe in their victimization. Everybody who is an abuser because they've believed in their victimization. Abuse is simply the flip side of imaginary victimization. Everybody who fucks up wants to pretend it's not their fault. It's the system. What chance do I have? The system is so oppressive. Won't let me get ahead. And the more they fail, and the more failures like that you breed in any community, I don't care where it is, what gender it is, what race it is, what culture it is, the more failures you breed because you have infested them with the brain maggots of victimization, the more losers and failures you breed, the more those losers and failures are going to turn around to all the kids and say, you can't get ahead. I tried, you can't get ahead. System, the man, the whites, the patriarchy, they're going to get you down. Grind you down. You got a chance. Kids are like, oh man, well that sucks. Man, I can't get ahead. There's apparently a man and a system and a patriarchy and white people. We can't get ahead. Oh God. Well, if we can't get ahead, what the hell is the point of even trying? Why bother? And you have the great challenge of explaining to yourself and to others why, if there's this terrible system that keeps you all down, how that person and 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 that person made it out. They become your enemy. You must tear them down. Now the victimization is not top down, but bottom up. Bottom up. Instead of the fantasy that there's a group pushing another person down. The reality is if people believe that fantasy, oh, there is oppression, but it's bottom up. It's bottom up. It's if you make it out, you are shattering the myth of victimization, so I better pull you back down. Fuck statistics. Fuck the trends. Will your life. Inevitability is for raindrops. Human beings have will and choice and the capacity to project yourself beyond the circumstances of the moment and shoot your hopes like a grappling hook to a higher plane and pull yourself up muscle by muscle. Other people will try to sell you on the inevitability of failure and the universality of injustice and the prevalence of the grinding down gears of the privileged and the powerful. Do not listen to them for a moment. They are viruses of failure. They are viruses attempting to justify their own pathetic non-entity non-existences by having you not succeed. They are vampires. They have no reflection. They live in the dark and they live in a coffin.